The origin of Friday the 13th, a descent into darkness. Hey there, fellow night dwellers, seekers of the unknown, and lovers of the eerie. Tonight, we unravel the dark and twisted history of one of the most dreaded and feared dates in Western folklore, Friday the 13th. But this isn't just any history lesson. Oh no, we're going to journey into the chilling origins of where it all began, the blood-soaked rituals, cursed souls, and malevolent forces that lurk behind this ominous day. So, sit tight, dim the lights, and let's take a dive deep into the shadows where truth and legend blur. Ready? Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Number of the Cursed. Before Friday the 13th, the number 13 itself has been branded with fear, disdain, and superstition for centuries. Why this number, you ask? Well, let's take a look at the myths and legends that branded 13 with the mark of the beast. In the beginning, many ancient cultures saw 12 as the number of completeness, 12 gods of Olympus, 12 months of the year, 12 signs of the zodiac, even 12 disciples of Christ. The number 13, therefore, came to represent imbalance, disorder, and disruption. It was the odd one out, the number that tipped the scales into chaos. In Norse mythology, the gods held a grand banquet in Valhalla. 12 gods attended, and the party was harmonious. Then came the uninvited guest, Loki, the god of mischief, making himself the 13th guest. With his arrival came destruction and death, as he orchestrated the death of the beloved god Balder, tipping the feast into tragedy and marking the number 13 with dark misfortune. In the Christian faith, the betrayal of Christ is often cited as one of the origins of the bad luck tied to 13. At the Last Supper, there were 13 individuals present, and it was the 13th guest, Judas Iscariot, who would betray Jesus, leading to his crucifixion. From that moment, the number 13 became linked to treachery and doom, the symbol of a curse that lingers over any event with such unlucky numbers. But why does the 13th step into ruin and darkness? Could it be that numbers themselves carry power? That within the structure of our world, certain numbers unlock doors better left unopened? Imagine the world as an intricate machine, with gears and levers in perfect alignment. Then imagine number 13 as the gear that slips. That cracks the system, inviting something else into our reality. Chapter 2. Friday's Dark History. Now, the number May 13th have a legacy of terror, but Friday itself has a particularly gloomy reputation in various cultures. To understand why Friday and 13, when combined, form such a potent cocktail of dread, we must look back at Friday's own haunted past. In Christianity, it is believed that Jesus was crucified on a Friday, making the day a somber one marked by sacrifice and suffering. Christians would commemorate Good Friday as a day of mourning, a reminder of the divine betrayal that led to Christ's death. From this arose the tradition that Fridays were days to avoid celebration or joyful events, for they could invite disaster. But it's not just the crucifixion that casts a shadow over Fridays. In some ancient cultures, particularly among seafaring folk, it was considered bad luck to set sail on a Friday. The legend goes that any ship launched on a Friday would be doomed to meet its watery end, claimed by the depths of the ocean and cursed to never return. As the sailors would whisper before embarking on their treacherous voyages, "Beware the water's call on a Friday." Perhaps there's more to Fridays than just superstition. Could it be that certain days are marked by the movements of forces we cannot comprehend? Is there something intrinsic in the flow of time that makes Fridays a portal for misfortune and ill will? These are questions the wise dare not ask, for fear that the answer might prove more real than we'd hope. And then came the day when two malevolent forces, Friday and 13, would collide in a storm of terror. Let me take you now to the dark heart of Friday, the 13th's curse. Chapter 3. The Curse of the Templars. It was Friday, October 13th, 1307, a day that would forever be etched in the annals of horror. On this fateful Friday, King Philip IV of France, fueled by greed and a deep hatred of a once mighty religious order, issued a secret decree that would seal the fate of hundreds of men. The Knights Templar, a revered and powerful group of warriors who had fought in the Crusades, were arrested, tortured, and brutally executed under accusations of heresy, devil worship, and dark rituals. These knights were hunted down in the dead of night. Their wealth was seized, and their lands confiscated. But their true crime? Defying the king's desire for control. The Templars were known to hold mystical secrets, knowledge of ancient powers that could rival even the mightiest of rulers. On that cursed Friday, as the fires of the stake burned and the screams of the Templars filled the air, it's said that Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, uttered a dying curse. With his last breath, he called down vengeance upon King Philip and Pope Clement V, both of whom had betrayed the order. Before a year is out, both of you shall meet me in judgment before God, he cursed, as the flames consumed him. History tells that the curse took root. Both King Philip and Pope Clement V met untimely deaths within months of de Molay's execution. Their dynasties crumbled, their legacies tarnished, and thus, the curse of Friday the 13th was born, a day not just of bad luck, but of divine retribution, a day when the walls between justice and vengeance were thin. But the Templars' curse was not confined to the monarchy of France. The shadow of their betrayal lingers still, woven into the fabric of Friday the 13th. It's whispered that on this day, the spirits of the damned rise, seeking retribution, searching for the bloodlines of those who wronged them. Could it be that Friday the 13th is a day marked not by chance, but by purpose, a day when the scales of cosmic justice are weighed, and the guilty are found wanting? Chapter 4, The Witches' Sabbath. Now, let's travel further back, to the time of witches, when the line between the living and the dead was perilously thin. Witchcraft has always been steeped in mystery, and in ancient Europe, Fridays were believed to be the most potent day for witches to convene their dark covens and perform unholy rites. According to medieval legends, Fridays were when witches gathered for their Sabbath, a night of casting spells, invoking spirits, and consorting with demons. It's no coincidence that Fridays, especially the 13th, were seen as a day when black magic was at its peak. The number 13, long associated with the goddess in pagan tradition, was later demonized by the church, linking it to the devil and his infernal agents. Witches, it was believed, would meet under the cover of darkness, using the power of Friday the 13th to curse crops, cause sickness, or worse, summon death itself. Their rituals would take place deep in the forests, far from prying eyes, where ancient trees would whisper incantations and the ground itself would tremble with unseen power. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of these Sabbaths was the belief that witches could bend the very fabric of fate. With their dark arts, they could manipulate the future, alter the course of one's destiny, or seal a soul's doom. Imagine walking through the woods on a Friday the 13th, hearing distant chanting and seeing the glow of firelight through the trees. Do you dare approach, or do you turn back, knowing full well that you might be the next sacrifice? Chapter 5, Modern Horror, The Blood Trail of Friday the 13th. As the centuries passed, the dread surrounding Friday the 13th only deepened. In modern times, the day has become synonymous with fear, thanks in no small part to the media, particularly horror films, urban legends, and tragic events that have occurred on this day. Friday the 13th, the horror film series that began in 1980, solidified this date as a time of terror. The films, centered around the iconic killer Jason Voorhees, turned the day into a pop culture phenomenon. But Jason's vengeful rampages are not the only horrors tied to Friday the 13th. There have been countless real-life disasters on Friday the 13th that have left a lasting mark. Airplane crashes, shipwrecks, stock market collapses, and even murders have all occurred on this dreaded day. Some believe these events are mere coincidence, but others whisper that perhaps the ancient curse of the Templars, the spells of witches, or the wrath of malevolent forces still lingers, waiting to strike when we least expect it. One such incident occurred in 1976, when Daz Baxter, a New Yorker gripped by his fear of Friday the 13th, decided to stay in his bed all day to avoid any possible bad luck. Unfortunately, Baxter's attempt to outsmart fate ended in tragedy when the floor of his apartment collapsed, sending him plummeting to his death. No matter how hard he tried to escape, the curse found him. Chapter 6: A Haunting Legacy. So, here we are, centuries after Friday the 13th first cast its shadow across the calendar. And the fear remains. Despite all of our modern advances, despite all of our science and logic, there's something deep within us that still shudders at the thought of this day. Perhaps it's the stories passed down from generation to generation. Or maybe it's something older, something primal, a fear of the unknown. Could it be that we're all connected to the ancient energies that curse this day? That every Friday the 13th, we are reminded of our fragility, of the unseen forces that still dance around us. Just out of reach? Or is it simply that we need a day to fear, a day to confront our darkest imaginings? Whatever the case, Friday the 13th remains a symbol of the unknown. A date when we can't help but feel the icy touch of fate. It's a day when we remember that the world is not as safe, not as predictable as we'd like to think. Conclusion: as we close the chapter on the dark history of Friday the 13th, we are left with more questions than answers. But that's the nature of these things, isn't it? There are no definitive conclusions, no clear resolutions, only whispers in the dark and shadows that stretch a little longer than they should. So, next time you find yourself looking at the calendar and you see that ominous date approaching, Friday the 13th, just remember, it's not just a number. It's a doorway, a portal to a world where anything can happen. Be careful where you step, because sometimes the curse is watching. Thank you for joining me on this eerie journey. If you enjoyed this tale and want more stories of the supernatural, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And remember, no matter how safe you think you are, there's always something lurking just behind you,